Yellowbird. Oh boy, you know what? It has a subtitle. I should have looked for this before, but I read a book, I listened to it on audiobook. Hang on. Okay. The subtitle is Oil, Murder, and a Woman's Search for Justice in Indian Country. This is by Sierra Crane Murdoch. Okay, so I think this came up because I was just like looking for true crime books on audio, and a lot of true crime is not, you know, it's not like, I haven't really read that many books you could classify as true crime, because there are a number of them, especially older ones, that are just kind of trashy. Like, not that trashy is a bad thing necessarily, but like with true crime, I'm very picky. I want to read stuff that's like accurate and respectful. Anyway, so this came up and it's a pretty new book, so it's not like as crimey as I was hoping it would be. So basically what it's about is this young man who was working for a truck company at the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota, like 10 years ago-ish, disappeared, and eventually everybody's like, he's dead. They spend this entire book searching for his body, and I don't remember if they found it. I don't think they did. Like, all of this stuff keeps coming out, like eventually, like, oh, this is the guy who killed him, so like they know who did it. And the guy's like, he's buried here, but like they still can't find the body. I mean, he's supposed to be buried in some particular area of the Badlands, and so I'm like, I guess that would be just difficult to remember exactly where you were because it's all a mess and moving around and changing. Not moving, it's not moving. And people are gonna think that, listen to this and think the Badlands are something that they're not, no. But they are always changing like a bit, but I was hoping that there would be more intrigue. Okay, I was hoping there would be more conspiracies. I was hoping that there would be more just like about the oil fields and how they were a terrible place to work, and there was some of this, but like mostly it wasn't that, which I mean, I'm asking, you know, nonfiction to be something else, and it's like, okay, but if that didn't happen, that's not what the book's gonna be about, bruh. But that's what I was hoping it would be. So a lot of it is about this woman named Lissa Yellowbird, who is a member of the MHA Nation, which stands for Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara, and they have a reservation that the oil was found under. It's kind of like, well, not really, but it's kind of like a modern day version of the Osage Nation finding all of that oil in the 1920s in Oklahoma, except that people weren't getting murdered this time, so that's nice. There was more just on the sort of on the line of like taking advantage of these people, because it's like, oh, we can, you know, you can lease your land to a company to pump the oil, to do fracking, all that shit. And then basically they just weren't asking for enough because they just were like normal ass people who didn't actually know how much money they could get out of these oil companies if they really, you know, because it was worth a lot more than what they were getting. But a lot of money was going to the tribe at this time as well, like just like the, I guess, collective tribe. And there was a lot of stuff about money. So, and some corruption, you know, fun times. But Lissa Yellowbird is a member of this nation, and she just became obsessed with finding this kid. And I'm calling him a kid because the book keeps referring to him being young, even though I think at one point they say he's like 20, he was like 29. And I'm like, I mean, that's not old, but that's not like he was super young either. It was just like a regular age. But anyway, what the fuck am I saying? Okay, yes. So he was just somebody who was like from Washington State or Texas or something. I don't know. He lived in Texas. I think his grandfather lived in Washington State. I'm not sure where he grew up. I forget. But, you know, so he was just hired to work for a company. He wasn't even like drilling oil. He was just like supposed to be driving trucks that carry all the water that they have to use. And there was some stuff in there too that was interesting about how they just like aren't dumping the water where they should be dumping it, because where they should be dumping it once it's been used and it's like contaminated, they should be dumping it in particular places, but they're further away, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But anyway, that's not really what it's about. So Lissa becomes obsessed with trying to find him. And we're trying to take down the owners of the trucking company because she believes that it's up to, or at least the guy was behind Casey, this guy's name was Casey, his death. And like that all eventually did come out and she was right. But Lissa's an interesting character, really. Like she had like, it just kind of bounces through her life a lot, and she has a bunch of kids. She's had a lot of shitty relationships. She's like been addicted to, I think it was heroin, I think. And then she was in prison for a couple of years, and gets really obsessed with finding this guy shortly after she's released. And then what's interesting too is this kind of expands into her becoming a person that people go to when someone in their family is missing, and she's like helped find other people. And like, I think it's, you know, one of the funny things is people in the book are always just like, why are you so obsessed with this though? And I'm like, can she not have a compassion for humankind? Like, why does she need to have a reason? But anyway, like, but, you know, it was a pretty good book. It wasn't as, I don't know, exciting, I guess, as I hoped it would be, but like, you did learn a bunch about the MHA Nation and about the oil fields, and especially just from the perspective of the people living there, and like, just a lot about this stuff. Also, okay, they use the phrase man camp a lot to describe like the kind of almost makeshift trailer parks that these like oil workers, these oil men would be living in, because there just wasn't enough like permanent housing, because, you know, suddenly you've got an influx of a whole ton of people into the area. And man camp is just a hilarious phrase, so I kind of giggled every time they said that. But it's a pretty good book. Like, that's what I'll say about it. It's pretty good. And yeah, I don't know. I actually have a friend who lives in that general area, and I mean, I looked at a map and she's still a little bit ways out of it, but still kind of close-ish by North Dakota standards. I don't know. They did mention the town she lives in once, and I was like, yeah. But anyway, so finally finished a book in August. It took me this long. You don't know what day it is. It's the 12th. Like almost halfway through this month, and I finally finished a book. Also, have not been really listening to the audiobooks a ton because I'm not driving as much, you know, it's far. So that's too bad. But this was an audiobook I finally finished. And also, I think that I perhaps would have appreciated the book a bit more if I hadn't, you know, basically failed to finish it within the 2 weeks and then had to wait like a month before I got the book back from Libby. So like, there's like one copy, which is not fair, but yeah, so I did have to take a pause partway through, which was too bad, but you know, I got back into it. But this is an interesting book. It's definitely like focusing on people and place that I've never read about before. So for that alone, I think it's worth it. Hello. I finally read Spineless by Julie Berwald. First of all, please observe how gorgeous this cover is. This book is about jellyfish. And it's also about like how climate change is affecting the ocean, and also how like fishing and farming and things like of that nature are affecting the ocean. Kind of through the lens of jellyfish, but also just like in general, I guess. It's about this woman who just is really obsessed with jellyfish, and she doesn't even study them or anything. She just became obsessed with them one day, and like she had studied marine biology in school, but then didn't really do anything with it like after graduate school or whatever, and decided to get back into looking at some of that stuff. And she travels around and talks to scientists and looks at jellyfish and eats some jellyfish. It turns out people eat jellyfish. I did not know that. Fun fact. It was okay. Like, I don't know. It's pretty well written. I just wasn't wildly into it. But I don't know, I feel like I did learn a fair amount about jellyfish. I feel like I could have learned more, you know? But the funny thing is, I wanted this book specifically. I asked for it. My parents bought it for me for Christmas a few years ago, and they were like, how could anybody write an entire book about jellyfish? And I'm like, I mean, it seems so obvious to me that jellyfish must be very complicated to be alive. Like, I understand that they're simple in the sense that they don't have brains and they don't have skeletons, but, like, there's so much that would need explaining for the audience to understand it. Like if you were writing a book about, like, say, bears, you don't need to explain how bears, like, see and hear and eat. But jellyfish, you have to explain all that because they're so different from humans, you know? So there was interesting stuff about how they see and how they get around and how they like work. I was gonna say how their brains work, but they don't have brains really, but they have a nervous system. And like jellyfish are truly ancient. They've existed for, let's see, at the back it says well over 500 million years, longer than any other animal that lives on the planet. And yeah, they've really been kicking it for forever. And it's just, I don't know, they're really quite cool, jellyfish. I don't have anything to say. It was an alright book. I'm glad I finally read it. The cover is beautiful. And, yeah. Yep. I know things about jellyfish now. I'm going to forget them, but I'll know them for a little while at least. So that's something. It's not nothing. Oh, hello, I'm beaming into you from my hotel room. My first vacation in 2 years. To tell you about Foundation by Isaac Asimov. So this one I got on audiobook, and basically it was so that I would have something to listen to on the drive up here. So I mostly listened to it in one day, and then I finished it off today, the last like bit, and boy, was this a book. Okay, what do I even say about it? Foundation it's something that I like feel like so many people have heard of without really knowing anything about it. And it's hard to describe because it doesn't really have a single plot or a main character. It's kind of, it's a combination of several shorter things that kind of go one after, like, there's a sequence of time that time like continues passing, and you get new characters in each bit. And basically the basic concept is that there's this big galactic empire, and then there's this man who discovers this mathematical statistical analysis called psychohistory, where basically if you have enough information, you can calculate the future. If you have enough people kind of to calculate it off of. So you can't really tell what's going to happen to one individual person in their life, but you can make a prediction about what the future is going to be for, like, say, an entire galactic empire. And he predicts that within 500 years the empire is going to collapse, and naturally the authorities are mad about it. And he's got this group of people he's kind of brought together to put together this encyclopedia of all of the scientific knowledge so that when the empire does collapse, it isn't lost. So they get exiled to this planet called Terminus, which is way out in the kind of outer rim of the galaxy. And okay, so the problem with this book is that it's pretty much just people having conversations. And in each time period, there'll be like a 50 or so year jump, and you'll get new characters most of the time, and some crisis will be taking place. And like basically you have the group putting together the encyclopedia becomes known as the Foundation. Okay, so that's where the title comes from. And at the 50-year mark, they realize and they find out that the encyclopedia wasn't the entire point. The actual point was that they needed to kind of continue to survive and basically at some point supplant the Galactic Empire. So the Empire is way out there, and they're not really connected to Terminus and to the Foundation, and just kind of as time passes, the Foundation gains more power within their sector. And one assumes eventually, after, as they say 1,000 years are supposed to pass while this is taking place, the Foundation will kind of form a new empire. And God, okay, so this book, first of all, is set over the course of like, I don't know, 100, 200 years roughly, I guess 200 years. So you don't even get to see the end of this entire thing. I assume, obviously, that like there's a bunch of other books in the series, so some of them will probably get into that. But I kind of feel like it wasn't that great of a book. Oh boy, like world building is interesting, but there's no characters to latch onto, and every single main character of a section, all they do is talk about how they've made some decisions and they have figured out, and like they're never wrong. They always successfully figure out what it is they need to do. And the sort of vague concept is that with each of these crises, the guy who's predicted all this future has kind of predicted and figured it so that once they reach a certain point, they will have only one choice to move forward. But it's still, it's annoying to have all of these characters who just kind of smugly explain how they figured everything out, and they're never wrong. And it's annoying. And I don't care about any of them. And I don't really care about anything going on in this book. Like at all. So there's that. And yeah, am I gonna keep reading the series? Yes. I don't know why, but I want to know what happens later. Maybe it'll get interesting at some point. I don't know. Like I have this desire for it to get interesting and a hope that it will. I don't know that it will though. I also cannot imagine why anybody would want to read just the sections of this book, because I think it was published in like maybe 3 shorter stories in different things, and it's like, why? How are any of these interesting? You know, like I love Asimov, okay? I do, I love his books, but this is just not it for me, which is too bad because the sort of Galactic Empire space opera, really broad sweeping stuff is my thing. But I wouldn't call this a space opera. Like it really doesn't have, the characters. It doesn't have like the real scope. Like it has scope, but you don't care about any of it. So I don't know, whatever. That's Foundation. I don't know. Yeah, not my thing, but I'm gonna read the sequel at some point. I don't know if I'll do it anytime soon because like this was not that interesting, but you know, eventually. So, but hey, I read it and now I know, right? Hello, hello. And it's Solaris by Stanislaw Lem. Little book. Took a surprisingly long amount of time to read. It was just kind of a very like dense and slow thing. I liked it. I'd say it's kind of it's pretty solid. I don't know. I would say kind of, I guess I liked it an average amount. I don't know, because there were parts that I really liked. And then there were parts that I thought were incredibly boring. So I kind of have to like average that together, right? So this book is about a psychologist. I'm like, right? He was a psychologist? Yeah. A psychologist who is sent to the far-off planet of Solaris, where there's a space station. Well, I guess it's not in space. Whatever. There's a station there, and there are people studying the living ocean of Solaris. And he's sent there because I don't really remember why. Whatever, who cares? Okay, it doesn't matter. He's sent there and finds out right away that one of the 3 guys there at the mission is dead and that some really weird shit has been happening. And basically the book is about how these people have like appeared on the station. And it seems like they must come from the planet, but they're exact replicas of people that the scientists know. And we never find out what the other guys' like visitors are, but Kelvin, the main character, his visitor is this woman Rhea, who killed herself 10 years ago, right? And I guess she was his wife. He does say that once, but weirdly that's not how she's introduced exactly, but whatever. So his wife who killed herself 10 years ago. And but here she is, not remembering any of that, and also not knowing how she got here. And also she doesn't need to like eat and sleep, and when she is injured at one point she gets healed very quickly. And so it's very weird and very kind of creepy. And you know, they're trying to decide, what do we do about this? And what does it mean? And who are these people really, and what does this tell us about the ocean? The boring parts are the parts where he goes to the library on the station and just reads about the other expeditions to the planet and all the weird shit that the ocean makes. And I was just like, I don't know, I was dying. I just did not care. But it had a really good ending, I thought. So that kind of always just, you know, if a book ends really well, you're like, oh yeah, that was a good book. Even if you were really bored during other parts. But yeah, so it's kind of creepy and it's kind of sad. And I really liked the last 3 pages. I felt like the issue that I had, that the ending at least attempted to ameliorate. My issue was like, I never felt exactly how much it would affect a person to have somebody that has died that they loved just appear. I felt like I was supposed to maybe be bringing that to the book. I was like, I want the book to describe this to me. Like, I want the book to like really get in there, and I didn't feel like it did until maybe the very end. And I thought that was too bad, like, but I don't know. It's a pretty good book. I mean, this is, you know, this is a classic of sci-fi, of course, and it's translated from Polish. I've been wanting to read something by Stanislaw Lem for a while, so like, glad I finally did. And there's a couple of movie versions of this. I've seen the, like, I guess American, right, version with George Clooney. It's pretty different. I don't remember it very well at all, but there is also a like 5-hour-long Russian version, right, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. And it would be cool to watch that sometime. That's how I feel, because I think that you could do something really interesting with this idea in a movie. You could be very like surreal, I think, with it, and that would be cool. But you know, it was a decent book, just decent. But I gotta read more about this guy. Maybe I'll find the one book of his that really will blow my mind. Hello, I finished If It Makes You Happy by Claire Can. So we gotta talk about it. This is by the same author as Let's Talk About Love. It is not a sequel, but it's kind of similar. Which means that, you know, I'm making the weird choice to read young adult contemporary again, even though I don't like young adult contemporary. But whatever, this book was fine. You know, it went by real fast, and it kept me engaged, and I liked the characters well enough. I think I just kind of often come away from these books just feeling like they're not very complex or deep, and they don't make up for it in any way, you know, because like I'll read a sci-fi book, right, which does not have complex or deep characters, but it makes up for that by having a lot of really bonkers world building. And like, obviously contemporaries don't, because they're contemporaries. But okay, so this is set in like a cute small town somewhere in America. I don't think they ever told us. But this girl, Winnie, has just graduated high school, and she has come every summer of her life practically to spend the summer working at her grandmother's diner, Goldine's. So I went into this book knowing that there was going to be a cooking contest, and thinking for some reason that Winnie was going to be participating in it, but like she's not actually. So that's weird. She doesn't cook, she just works at the diner as like a waitress and a manager. Oh, it's coming back on, sorry. Air conditioner times. God, okay, so why did I read this? I read this because I liked Let's Talk About Love pretty well, and also because the thing I heard about this book was that the main character is in a queer platonic relationship. And that's pretty true. They don't really call it that, but like they talk about a lot how they're in this, you know, in this platonic, they're in this friendship, but it's like basically a queer platonic relationship. They call themselves ungirlfriends, which I think is very cute. But she has this crush on this guy in town and wants to start dating him, so it gets kind of awkward. So I thought it was going to be I mean, obviously my thought was the conflict is going to be that she is trying to figure out how to, I don't know, how do I date this guy when I've got this ungirlfriend that, am I going to just have to dump her? But that's not really what happens, because they're actually like, this was already something they thought would happen in theory, it just never happened in practice yet. I don't know, but there is relationship drama, and I really liked the aromantic character, Kara, who is the ungirlfriend, right? And I was like, yeah, her stuff makes sense. She makes perfect sense to me. And there were a lot of characters in this, and there was a lot of stuff going on. I feel like if I'm just kind of compare it to Let's Talk About Love, this has more happening and it has more characters, and I like that about it. I think that's a positive thing. There's a fun gimmick in it where she and family or friends will be sending texts, and you'll see that kind of on the screen. Why the hell can't I find one? So it'll be kind of set up like this. Weirdly enough, this is also a book where the main character, just like in Let's Talk About Love, where the main character has interactions with her parents only via telephone or text. They never appear on page. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, I liked her well enough. The love interest character, Dallas, was fine. I didn't think he was terribly interesting, but I mean, I guess Takumi from the other book wasn't interesting either. But he's nice enough. And like overall, it's just kind of a sweet book, and a quick read, and there's some stuff in there about fat phobia and about her contentious relationship with her grandmother. And it's all right, it's all fine. Like, it's not complicated, it's not terribly interesting, but like, it is there, it is what it is. And I did like it pretty well. Also, it's got another great cover. I mean, I don't think anything can top the cover for Let's Talk About Love, for the sheer ace flag colors of it all. But this is just a really colorful, nice book. I don't know if this woman has written another one in this kind of, it's not a series, but you know what I mean. I don't think so. I want her to. It's been a couple of years. Where's my threequel? Anyway, also, I feel like I need to point out that the characters from Let's Talk About Love do appear in this book. At one point, they go to the diner. They're not named, but I'm reading it like, okay, that's them. That's obviously them. They've gone on a road trip. It's them. So that was kind of cute. A little bit of fan service, I guess. But anyway, yeah, it's just totally not my kind of thing, but I did enjoy it. And I guess I kind of like generally how she writes. I don't know. I would like there to be a third one, I guess, and see what she comes up with next. It is time to talk about my latest audiobook, A Queer History of the United States by Michael Bronski, I think. Yeah, so I listened to this one largely on my vacation as well, but I finished it once I came back, and it was interesting. So, okay, how do I get into this? Like, I don't necessarily want to explain the entirety of queer history of the United States. I feel like my impulse is to be like, listen to all the cool things that I learned, but like, that's not what a book review is. Okay. That's, I mean, it's the history of the United States and really of kind of I can't speak. Okay, so it's not America because it really doesn't go into the history of any other part of the country, or sorry, part of the continent or part of the other, both double continents, you know what I mean. But it doesn't start with like the United States of America becoming a thing. It starts a bit earlier, and it talks about, you know, Europeans coming over here, and it talks a bit about some of the ways that some of the Native Americans had some different gender stuff going on, and how the Europeans reacted to that, and stuff like that too. It's an interesting book because he spends a lot of time talking about like how like, for example, masculinity was perceived in different time periods, and why, and what it was like reacting to. And it's not just a book that just lists queer people in history, you know, that's not what it's about. It's about like something kind of broader than that, I guess. There was like a lot of interesting stuff, okay. I was especially interested in the older history, but you know, because I feel like once you get to the 20th century, you come into some more stuff that I'm more familiar with. But it is really an interesting thing to kind of go through the entire, you know, however many, several centuries that this goes over, and it comes to 1990, basically. The book was written in 2012. So the epilogue talks about a few things that are newer than 1990, but it is kind of an interesting thing because I was listening to it and I was like, wait, this is from 2012. Like, so much has happened even since then, you know? And, but yeah, just like following kind of the trends, like the one big trend that comes up a lot in different ways is the trend of like, basically the trend of purity culture one way or another. And it's a really interesting lens, I think, through which to look at American history. There are some things I wish the book had done differently. I wish it had had more trans history. Like, he talks about it a little bit, but I really wanted more about how kind of concepts of, you know, where did the concept of being transgender really kind of like, where does that, I don't know, develop from, I guess. Because he talks about a few individual people, but really like doesn't get into much more than that, including at times where I'm just kind of like you should talk about this, you know. And I would have liked a little bit about, I don't know, about like, also about like gender surgery. I mean, obviously I'm not asking for a whole chapter on the subject, but a couple of paragraphs. Like, I know, I've seen all those newspaper articles about that person that, I guess, who was in the US Army and then transitioned, and this was like something they talked about like in the newspapers. Her name was Christine something, I don't know. But that kind of thing wasn't mentioned, which I thought would have been interesting. Like, how did people react to that? What did that you know, even mean for a regular person who had no real connection to it. So yeah, so the book really focuses a lot on gay and lesbian history, and that makes sense, but it is a little bit frustrating. Also, I wish he had mentioned when he was describing the Kinsey scale that you can also get an X. Like, he didn't, and I was just like, it would have taken 5 words, bruh, like, you know, a sentence, come on, throw me a bone. But, you know, other than these complaints, it was a good book. It was really an interesting, like, way to look at American history, and I think it's like a broad overview, I guess. Like, it made me really want to learn more about some of these specific times and some of these things and just really dig deeper into some of it. That's just, yeah, it was really interesting, and I would definitely recommend it. Yeah, for sure.